All right, welcome back to the program. Just like I said during the intro, that we will be looking at what women perhaps across the world has been able to achieve, at least in the last 1 year. Joining me right now is Ngover Ihyembe-Nwankwo, who is the Executive Council Chairperson, Women in Management, Business and Public Service. We know that group as WIMBIZ. Hello, Ngover, and good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Great to see you too, and thank you for having me.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Good to see you. Quite a while. How are you doing?
Yes.
I think it's
I'm well.
It's not out of place to say International Women's Day, Happy Women's Day, because even the whole month of March will be Happy Women's Day. In fact, the whole of the year.
Yes. Yes. Every day is International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day.
Yes. Ngover, let me start this way by asking, when I took a look at the history of International Women's Day, it was founded by a woman known as Clara Zetkin in 1910. And the aim or the objectives then, they were protesting in New York City in the US to have short working hours, to be able to have the right to vote, as well as have the right to a better pay. More than a century later, do you think we've been able to achieve this as women?
So Nancy, it's interesting that you start with that because, we're still campaigning for better working hours. We're still campaigning for equal pay. And in some areas, we're still campaigning for not only the right to vote, but the right for women to participate equally in politics. So if you compare us to where we were 11 years ago now, off on the face of it, I would say we've made some progress. So we see more women accepted into workplaces. We're seeing more women in leadership positions, more women able to participate. More women are actively working or pursuing their dreams. But then there's still quite a number of women who don't have those opportunities. And even when you look at the overall statistics, we still only have, I think, 22 countries who have female leadership. Of those 22 countries, it means that 119 women have never seen a female leader. When we even look at business and entrepreneurship, and we look at sort of the Forbes CEO of Fortune 500 companies, only 7.4% of those companies are run by women. Women are less likely to be entrepreneurs, and they face more disadvantages. And of course, bringing it home to Nigeria, looking at political representation, we're still at 4%.
It's interesting that you took me on this journey. Let us stick with this journey a bit in terms of women in leadership. And let us talk about the year 2020, which was a pandemic year. Even 2021 is still a pandemic year. So if you take a look at the pandemic year for women, last year, I remember I also had a program looking at leadership in a crisis. And I realized that women leaders across the world, countries that had the best responses to COVID-19, were all led by women. Angela Merkel of Germany, Sanna Marin of Finland, who happens to be the youngest head of state. We also have the leader, the president of Norway. We have New Zealand, definitely, Jacinda Ardern. We have Denmark. We have, which other country? Iceland. We have Taiwan. Taiwan at the time eradicated COVID-19, even though they were so close, or they are so close to China, closest proximity to China. So a pandemic year for women, countries that had the best responses. What can the rest of the world learn from these women? Since you've brought me to women in leadership.
Yes, Nancy. I mean, the first thing I'll say is that certainly I think COVID has brought to our consciousness the fact that women can lead and that women can actually lead quite effectively. We always talk about sort of the inherent skill sets that men and women bring. And I think they're complementary for sure. I always say it's not a gender war. It's about, how do we lead together? And the truth is those countries, when you look at the policies and the way that the women who were in leadership were able to quickly address it. It goes back to some of the innate qualities that women are said to have. And I know it's difficult to sort of put all the women in one bucket, but we can clearly see from the representation of the way that they led and the results thereafter, that there's something to be said about women being in leadership, particularly when you're going through crisis situations and when you're really trying to build consensus and collaboration, which I think is a unique skill that women bring. And that's why I've always said that it's about diversity of thought, diversity of ideas. The more people you bring to a table that look at things differently, the more you can be sure that whatever resolves that come out of that meeting are more representative. And certainly with policies and laws, if women are not at the table making those policies and laws, you certainly are not hearing that voice, and you're going to exclude them in the way that you're thinking about what to do. So it makes sense. And I think the best sense of all is just looking at the statistics of the population. We say that we're sort of 48, 51 or 52. And that just goes to show, yes, I mean, I would say 50-50, but if we sort of look at the real statistics, so the truth is that even as we see it in nature, there's a reason why there's a balance. And we need to see that balance represented all through in other sectors.
Let me still stick with this leadership, women in leadership, because we've been talking now since at least 1910 that we do not have a lot of women representation in different sectors, even among boards of companies in Nigeria, which I will come back to. I think there's no female CEO in the top listed NSC listed companies in Nigeria. So sad, even at this time. I did hear Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala say—
I believe we have one. I believe
okay.
Cadbury.
Okay, Cadbury now.
I believe Cadbury.
Cadbury now, yes.
Cadbury does have,
and I think it was just an appointment some weeks ago, if you remember. You remember? I think it was not just too long ago. So Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala did say that women are brought in when there is a crisis, when you're looking for someone to do the job. Do you think so?
Sadly, it is true. There are studies that have been done, and I think there actually is even a terminology, and it's called the glass cliff, which is that we see many women being promoted into top leadership when there's a crisis, and they either sort of sink or swim, and typically the crisis is so deep and ingrained that many times they sink, and then that excuse is then used again and again when there are no other women brought forward. So that is the truth. Now, but we have seen, like I said, that in this particular crisis situation we found ourselves in, the women who have been given the opportunity to lead have actually led well. So it should then portend that we see more women brought into leadership. But I always say that it's not about one or two women. It's about many more women. It's about building a pipeline. It's about being intentional in ensuring that we have women involved. Because when women are involved from the start and we nurture and keep them in management or business or public service, naturally you'll see that filter through to leadership. I think what's happening is when we don't even have a strong pipeline of women because we're not intentional about keeping women in, we're not creating policies that ensure that they stay in their business or they stay in their jobs. And so when it comes to leadership, they're even fewer. And so we're talking about the one or two in leadership, as opposed to saying, oh, I've looked at the boards and, there's 50-50. There's 50% of leadership, 50% on boards, 50% on senior management. And that's, I think, where we need to be going to. And that's the conversation I think we need to have. It's not the token woman. There should be more women because it makes sense.
Because it makes sense. I always say too that involving women is smart economic sense. It's raised a very good business case, and not just women, but qualified women, especially when you see women that are qualified to engage in those roles. Like we've seen Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the tussle, even before she was confirmed, we saw what happened. And the whole world could see that she was the best qualified candidates in all of that. How do we begin in Nigeria to shape that conversation and to ensure that women are more involved in pivotal decisions in the country. If you take a look at perhaps President Buhari's cabinet, I think women just hold about 7% of elected positions, whereas, just like we said earlier, that women, if you take a look at the statistics, either we're 50-50 or 49-51 or however you take a look at it, what will get us to begin to involve ourselves in pivotal decisions?
I think we're actually much less than that in elected position. I think it is about 4%. We regressed from sort of the last cycle. We regressed quite significantly. I think we need to shift policy and culture. There's just no way around it. We have to be I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear you now. Yes, I can hear you now.
We have to be intentional about involving women in everything that we do, putting them at the center. And we have to have targets as to what do we see as being ideal. Personally, I think it's 50%, but we can start smaller. And when you have those targets and quotas at national level.
Okay, it seems the network has...
And it's,
okay,
sorry, I think there's a call that keeps trying to come in and I'm trying to cut it off.
Okay, go ahead, please.
But we have to be intentional, about it. And I think it's only then that we begin to now create the policies. We try to understand what's holding women back, and then we try to see them coming through.
Ngover, with your own experience, and I know a lot of things that WIMBIZ is doing and perhaps doing over the years, what barriers do you think have been inhibiting women to grow into and be in leadership positions, for example? What barriers? Are they the same barriers that were holding us like 100 years ago that are still holding us now?
The truth is that the life of a woman is very complex, and women hold a disproportionately higher burden in terms of the caregiving, the child rearing, the child nurturing, home care. And so there is this push and pull for many women with work and family. And people, if we're going to be intentional about it, we cannot sort of say that doesn't exist. We then have got to find, how do we support women? How do we give more parental leave, for example? How do we allow women to work more flexibly so they don't have to physically be in offices? How do we support them to do their work and take care of the family? How do we create, avenues for them to be able to keep the children? So companies have creches. As a government, we need to think about how women will go into work, but they've got to keep their kids somewhere. So are we sort of nurturing and encouraging them, providing grants where possible? Also, we don't see equal pay for equal work. So women still earn less than men. And then so that in itself is a bit of a disincentive to work hard and to stay in certain businesses. We also cannot sort of ignore the fact that typically the ways that people are rewarded with jobs. So I'll give an example. If you work in certain industries, to climb up the ladder, you're required to have either done rotations within the company or perhaps done transfers outside of your location, either within the country or outside the country. And for many women, it is difficult for them to do that. And so many companies didn't see that as a problem. But then what then happens is when you get up the ladder and your resume is being considered, as it were, next to somebody else who's done a lot, then you're sort of viewed negatively compared to the other person. So companies are now being more intentional around we want women to still have the ability to have worked in a different departments, but maybe they don't have to physically travel. Maybe we can do online, or perhaps you can do shorter stints. There are also laws that have always precluded women from participating fully, particularly labor laws around women being able to work in factories, women being able to work overnight. And so we need our laws to recognize gender parity, and we need to eliminate any laws that discriminate against women or create the opportunity for companies or corporations to discriminate against women. So there's a lot that needs to be done. But like I said, if we're intentional, that is something we want to do. And I think that's the first step. The understanding that where we are as a country with gender parity is unacceptable. And then getting stakeholders around the table and saying, what do we need to do? What is the target? And then tracking our progress. And of course, creating any penalties or incentives for companies that do really well or don't do well at all.
Do you think that we're achieving that gender inclusivity in Nigeria, especially regarding women having the lowest paying jobs, so to speak, or lower than men? You will see a man and a woman doing the same job, and a woman is paid less. And they are doing the same job, and I wonder why. And perhaps even the same qualification. They are being paid less. Women are also involved in some kind of vulnerable forms of employment. Women are given some employments, or some companies will say if a woman is pregnant, perhaps that's an automatic sack, or if she gets married, she's out of the company, or when she gives birth to a child, she can no longer be in the company. So how do we begin to get more women included? How do we begin to sensitize private companies, even public companies, or yes, talking about government now, you know, look at things differently? Because just like you said earlier, and if you empower a woman, you're making a smart business case. It doesn't make sense that you're leaving the rest of the 50% of your population not being empowered. It's to your own loss.
Nancy, I agree with you. And as WIMBIZ, as an organization, you know, we do a lot. Our 4 pillars are really to inspire, to empower, to get women networking together, and then to advocate. So we do a lot of advocacy work, talking exactly around this and trying to explain to people that it makes business sense. When women are in leadership positions, we first of all, the first thing that we see is that we're able to see diversity of thought. So they bring a certain color to decision making. The second thing we see is that growth is more sustainable. So we see over time that when you have women in leadership positions, the riskier business moves that perhaps may have been done if a woman was not there are eliminated. And so there's sustainability of earnings. We don't see as many fines for wrongdoing. And we see a lot more collaboration. We also see that the workforce is better engaged, and then there's less attrition. So these are the messages that we try to pass on so people see that there is a true benefit in bringing everyone to the table. I think the other point that you made around women being discriminated against, and I think it's done because they can get away with it. You know, unfortunately, we see a lot of people being taken advantage of, be it women, be it vulnerable members of society. And unless the government puts in place policies, and it's very strict with how we monitor compliance with the policies, people will always try to get away with things. It's just human nature. So I think what's missing is the framework that says this is not allowed, and then a penalty and enforcement of people who go against that. And that's what I said at the beginning, that there has to be an intentionality around where do we want to get as a country. We've seen other countries do it. Some have done it through quotas, some have done it through incentives, but they've been intentional and they've been able to achieve that. You can't achieve it without sort of setting out to do it. It can't be a by the way. And so my call today is really to saying to people like, women can be great leaders, as men are as well. I think men are also great leaders. And the thing is, we need to give both sides an equal seat at the table if we're really serious about economic growth. I always say to people, you know, when I look at the GDP statistics and I see, you know, I mean, we just luckily came out of a recession, but over time, when you look at Nigeria's growth rate, I think what we're missing in really trying to turbocharge this economy is bringing on board our women and really giving them the wings to fly.
Yes, you've just touched a nerve, because just like, yes, and I'm having goose pimples right now. I don't know why, because you just hit a nerve in terms of Our recession, we just came out of a recession, 0.11% growth. That is not even enough for a country that is growing close to 3%. So you can imagine if women businesses are better empowered than we are empowered right now. I mean beyond lip service. So what can be done for women? I know that the government has done quite a bit, at least in the last few years, not even during this administration, because it seems this administration took us back. In terms of women leadership, the statistics are there. When Jonathan was there, for example, we had more women in leadership positions. The likes of Okonjo-Iweala now that everyone is celebrating was appointed during Obasanjo, carried over to Jonathan. Now she's heading a global organization. We've seen women, the Ezekwesilis of this world, World Bank, the Arun Motes of SEC, the former NSC chief executive, Ndi Okereke Onyuke. Yes.
Dr. Johnson as well.
Yes, the Dr. Omobola Johnson. So if we call Muigu, we revolutionized the FIRS that we're seeing right now. So I can go on and on. But this administration is like, they just took us back, I think 7 people out of 43 ministers. So what can be done really? Are there parts that we can play as women to help revolutionize or to help jolt the system? Just like you said, it's not a gender war. But men and women can lead together. What can we do, even as women? That's the A part of the question. The B part of the question is, what can government do in terms of empowering businesses that are owned by women? I know there was a fund that was released at the time by the Central Bank of Nigeria, 60% of it to women, the MSME fund and all of that. Even during UWIN, I think the second batch of UWIN went to part of it went for women and all of that. But we're seeing pockets of all of this. What can we do as a government holistically that can be felt? Ngover, 2 questions.
I'm trying to figure out, okay, I'll take your B first and then I'll go to A. I think in terms of what government can do, again, I don't see the intentionality within trying to unpack the issues that are hindering women. So we know that capital is one, but we've also seen in many countries that beyond just providing capital, there's a business incubation where we create hubs for women to come together, to network with each other, to access either its equipment, its market routes. So that intentionality around how do we help businesses to grow. I think we also cannot deny that Nigeria is a very tough country to run a business in, whether you're a man or a woman. And so at its base case, I would say, we need to also refocus on the ease of doing business and really look at how it affects people first, and then it affects women. And of course, looking at the things like access to childcare, making sure that women have the legislation in place to stop them getting harassed. And a lot of that, we're also seeing a lot of sort of harassment, and women are saying, look, I'd rather be in my home than come out and be subjected to some of the things that we're seeing. So we can't unpack it all today, but I think the starting point is, being intentional around knowing that we need women on board. And so what do we as a government need to do? Once we start with that, then I think we can put the right policies in place, because then we're thinking about it the right way. We're bringing the right stakeholders into the conversation. We're enabling and pushing for laws and policies that will turbocharge that. The first question is, what do we as women need to do? And, I'm going to sort of say and appeal to all women. I personally think that it's a myth that women don't support women. I've seen it in my life where people have supported me phenomenally. So I encourage women to continue to be a source of support to other women. A lot of times we talk about capital, but as an entrepreneur starting our business, I always say debt shouldn't be your first port of call for capital. Certainly you need to have your own equity, but there's also angel investing. There's also patient capital, which comes from your network of friends and family and acquaintances. And so building and strengthening that network allows us as women collectively to support and help one another. The other thing is to speak up. I think where we see things not being done right, where we see women being discriminated against or going through a tough time, it's not enough to look away. One has to look and speak up and help. The third thing that I will say is that as women, we've got to also be intentional about where do we see ourselves. If we see ourselves as equal partners, and if we see that it's a journey that we want to embark on, then we've got to be intentional about how do we as women drive our own agenda. So we need to drive the narrative. And that's why we have women like you who are driving the narrative by being in roles that women typically did not have, and for using that platform you have to amplify the message. But I think more importantly, it's about also capital. We need to grow ourselves and grow our capital so that we can put our capital where we want it to go. So we need to be intentional about growing our businesses and realize that doing well in your business, doing well in your career is not only for you, you're doing it for other women as well. So we want you to be successful and we want you to give back. We want you to grow your capital so that you can apply your capital either to other women as sort of angel investing or support, but even to causes, because a big part of getting things done is lobbying. There is a cost to being able to lobby effectively. So going around to talk to people, you need to put money behind it and time. So I encourage them. And the last thing I'll say is cultural practices. There are a lot of cultural and religious practices that hinder women's ability to grow and certainly to reach leadership positions. I think we as women need to challenge that. We need to speak up. It's not think it in our hearts. Sometimes you sit down, someone says something, it's wrong, but you don't want to fight it. We have to find ways to fight it. And it doesn't always have to be aggressive fighting, but we can't afford to be passive. We can't see things being done wrong or see laws being passed or community practices that hinder women and are discriminatory, and we keep quiet. Nobody else can fight this fight for us. We have to take the responsibility, knowing that there's an imbalance, and do our own bit to change it.
If you're talking about fighting this, because, as women, we've been trying to break through that deep-seated historical, cultural, socio-economic inhibitions that have been dragging us back. For example, women are not allowed to, be part of some top positions because it's not just a job for a woman. You can't even have a female, I don't know if we have a female traditional ruler right now in Nigeria, irrespective of the fact that we have Queen Amina of Zaria. Whether a movie should be done about that, or if a movie hasn't been done about that. Women that had led wars, even in ancient history. So beyond even just talking, are there some things that we can do so that we can break through these deep-seated historical barriers that are holding us back? You see, quite a whole lot of them, different communities, that this is Council of Chiefs, a woman cannot be a chief, for example, this and this, so quite a whole lot.
Yeah, no, Nancy, I hear you, and it saddens me quite a lot. I do think that there are things women can do, though. I think in every community, in most at least that I'm aware of, there is always a women's group. There is always the group that aligns women. So either in most Igbo communities, there's what you call an umwada, for example, and they're quite formidable in sort of making sure that women align and do things. And I think that at that level, we need to start to think, what are we really championing and fighting for as women? I'm coming, Nancy.
Okay.
For a second, I'm saying, what are we fighting for as women? What is the collective practice that we don't like or we want to change? And then as a collective, decide how are we going to change it? In many communities, and we still see it. I mean, I was watching, I think it was either Mexico or one of the countries that has been fighting gender-based violence. And the women have been most vocal. They've come together and said, you know what? We're going to either vote with our mouth, our legs, or anything else that we can vote with, that we can change the narrative. We're not going to stay on the periphery. We're going to advocate for something. And we're going to, if we have to, take some really interesting decisions as a collective. Many years ago, you saw women who said, we won't cook. We're going to go on strike for a week because we want to push something. In many communities where you have these women, when we're doing this fanfare, when a new chief is being crowned, right? The women come out. You want them to come out looking beautiful and dance. Have we ever thought of saying, we're not coming? How dare you not include women? you know what? Don't call us to an event. We're not coming to dance at your event. We're not coming to sing your praises, because as women, this is what we are pushing for. I think until we begin to see that activism as a collective, because we believe that we deserve better, we won't see change at cultural level.
You know, that was what I actually wanted to ask you about earlier when you talked about the Umuada thing, because even when you come to my village, I'm part of the Umuada. Do you understand? Yes. But what I have found out is that where the Umuada will come out is perhaps another woman is deemed to be misbehaving, or her husband died. She's now a widow. We need to cut her hair and all of that. If you take a look at the political scene, the governors or these political officers or these politicians, every 4 years, will want to come out. They want to go and do campaign. You see women putting on the same uniform, blouse, white blouse, green wrapper, green scarf, and they're all dancing. Oh, a governor wants to commission a road. You see the women dancing. And those kind of scenarios or the visuals, they get me so angry that at the end of the day, you see women doing those things, and they forget those women. Another 4 years, they come back again. What policies is government putting in place, or those Umuadas or those local, that's kind of activism should we see locally that we push forth for development for women in those local communities, or even national?
I think, we obviously need to see electoral reform so that our elections are freer and fairer, less expensive, so people can run. And we certainly have to sort of see a country that's developing better economically, so people are not swayed by 1,000 or 2,000. I think also the women that are more financially able, should look to supporting the women that are less, so that there's a less incentive for them to be swayed. But ultimately, you can't put policies in place if the people who the policies are supposed to protect don't want them or haven't pushed for them. So it goes back to, I don't know how it's going to change, but these conversations need to be held by women in their homes, in their families, in their communities. As women, what do we really want? It's not about dancing. And I always say I love to dance and I love to wear ashwebi. But, when there's seriousness, let's be serious. We see things going wrong. Those associations that we form should not be about castigating other women. Yes, there is a time and a place, and in every organization you have disciplinary action where it is required. But that should not be the only reason for the existence. The existence should be to move us collectively forward. And so we have to start to say to governors that I'm not coming to commission your road because you don't have enough female women in your cabinet. I'm not coming to commission your road because I heard you did this and you did that, and that sits against the code of womanhood. But we're still seeing where people who we've seen do things that are completely anti-women and continue to support violence against women, and yet we turn around on the other hand and give them kudos, give them awards, and that I think is wrong. And so my commitment is to have the conversations as loudly as I can in my space. And I'm asking every woman who will hear this today and listen to this to please, in your own space. Sometimes we think we have to start big. Today I'm saying let's start small, in our homes, in our communities, in our families, on those family WhatsApp groups that we all have. When we see things that are being done wrong, let's speak up. When we want to push an agenda that will benefit women, let us speak up. It's not okay for us to just be quiet. I think each of us must choose to challenge.
We should choose to challenge. That's the theme. Choose to challenge. And I choose to challenge today, the whole of this month of March, and for my lifetime, until I see a better world with women deserving what they should be in. And if you take a look at it, and let's take it from there, I think the UN said at the time that if we continue with this progress that we've seen for women development and women empowerment, that it will take us 130 years to achieve gender equality. 130 years, I don't think I'll be here again, even if I want to live long. I don't think I'll be here. That's a long time. So that's the A part of the question. The B part of the question is, what skills should we as women possess in the present and also for the future. Because if you take a look at even what COVID has done, COVID has changed a lot of things as we used to know it. So what skills as women? We are not just saying bring us to the table or let's go to the table. We must possess the right skills. We must possess everything that is right, so that at the end of the day, they would have no choice than to say, come on, this woman is qualified.
So, Nancy, beyond the skills that one takes for granted, so obviously literacy, numeracy, and then depending on what career area you want to go into, you have to build the requisite background that it allows you to compete favorably, and that will differ sector by sector, industry by industry. The one thing I think more women need to embrace is ambition. And over time, ambition has become a dirty word, and we're afraid to associate with it. But when you are ambitious, it makes you think of a longer term goal, and it then allows you to build in the steps to get there. So if you don't have a goal, we always talk about goal setting. What is goal setting? It is an ambition towards something. So we have to be ambitious in our careers, in our businesses, even in sort of our political journey. Say, this is where I want to get to. And if I want to get there, what are the things I need to do beforehand? Because it helps you to prioritize and to shape. And in my experience anyway, certainly what I've seen is the women who have achieved their goals are those who set them out in their heads. You don't have to tell people about it, but you yourself have got to embrace and say, this is where I want to go. Today, my business turnover is 500,000 naira. I challenge myself that, in a year, I want to grow it. And because you want to grow it, you learn about marketing. Because you want to grow, you look at your cost. Because you want to grow it, you look for capacity building seminars that you can go to train you to learn more. So I think that, beyond the normal skill sets that we expect, I think there also has to be that hunger, that desire for more.
Thank you for saying that word ambition is not a wrong word, because I've always struggled with it. You see men or you see people say, oh, that woman is too ambitious. But when it comes to a man, or for example, oh, that man is my oga, or that man is the chief executive. But for a woman, you hear the word boss. She's a boss, and that boss is connoted as someone that's like an evil woman. Oh, she's this, she's that. But for me, I don't even want to know so if I'm doing my job. So you can call me boss because perhaps I end it, So, yes. But if you take a look at this, especially this year that we're still fighting the pandemic, COVID-19, how do you think it has affected women, girls, as well as even young women?
Sadly, the pandemic has been quite destructive to gender parity. So women do sort of share a much higher percentage of the burden of sort of homes and cares, and with many schools not in school and those that are virtual, a lot of women have had to make the choice between career and home. We've also seen a lot of women in the vulnerable sectors. So service has been one of the most hit by the pandemic and continues to be hit. So the job losses have been, difficult to even comprehend. And where you have majority of women in that bucket, then you sort of see how that feeds into the overall statistics. We also see from a small to medium scale business perspective, that a lot of the smaller businesses have found it very difficult to absorb the shocks that the pandemic has brought to them, from the restrictions of movement that we saw earlier in the year to just the general things that they now have to put in place to be safe. And so that also has had an impact on women. So generally, COVID-19 has had a disproportionate negative effect on women. And for us to be able to, scale over that realization has to be there. So we then need to look for interventions and support to help women to overcome. There are a lot of things being done. So the government at the moment, the central bank, the Bank of Industry, they've put in quite a number of funds. And I encourage women to please read and check and see where they're eligible. But one cannot deny that it's been a very, very tough, more than 12 months now. I think we're going into the 13th month, certainly, of its impact onshore in Nigeria. And it's been quite catastrophic.
Final question for you, Ngover, just before we go. Would you say that the year 2020/2021 has been a year of the woman, so to speak, especially in terms of some women achieving giant strides? Kamala Harris, for example, the first female vice president of the United States, first in history. Janet Yellen, who was the Fed chair during Obama. I think she was also the first female chair, if I'm not mistaken, and now the first female Treasury Secretary. Our own Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, first female Director General, first African, first woman, WTO. ECB, Christine Lagarde, first female president of ECB from IMF. Now we have Kristalina Georgieva, another woman at the IMF. We have so many women breaking grounds, even regional bodies, what have you. Has it really been a year of the woman? Can this year inspire the remaining of us?
Certainly, it's been the year of the woman. We've seen almost every month a new ceiling being shattered. And that gives hope to many, many young girls. It gives them something to aspire to. So I'm very thankful to those women who stayed in their careers, despite all the issues that they've had to grapple with, but are giving us sort of the beacon of light that we can aspire to. And my encouragement is to the young girls who are seeing this, and to women who are also seeing this, is their lives have been incredibly tough. A lot of them have written books, and I encourage them to continue to read a lot of biographies, because it gives you insight, helps you to shape. I also say that we should, create support groups and networks, because sometimes you think you're the only one going through something, and then you realize that someone else has gone through it, and then you're able to see it as a blip, a temporary blip that you can overcome, as opposed to it being at the end of the world. But certainly, I would like to see the year of the woman continue. I would like it to be the norm, where we're seeing more and more women, and we're not seeing it as few and far between. I certainly want to see it in Nigeria. I want to see us having a seat at the table. I want that by the time we see elections coming around, there are many, many more women aspiring to leadership positions. I certainly want to see greater representation in our elected leadership. I also want to see bigger and better representation with the ministerial cabinets and across all the states as well. Let's not also forget that we don't have a female state governor. 36 states. It doesn't, it's mind-boggling. We need to see
women
that
vote.
change.
And we all come out to vote and dance in our rappers.
So women, please, I'm begging you, let's be intentional. Let's stand together as a collective. I think we're too easily divided. Please, it's for our benefit. We need more women, because when you have a woman there, at least she has a voice. When they want to bring out a policy that is repressive, she can say, have you guys thought about it this way? They have not, because they don't know.
No. Okay, I think Ngover will leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining me today, and let's do this sometime soon again.
Thank you, Nancy. I look forward to it.
All right. I've been speaking with Ngover Ihyembe-Nwankwo, who is the Executive Council Chairperson, Women in Management, Business and Public Service, WIMBIZ. That's the much we can take. Thank you all for being a part of the show. Be the best you can be. Be the change you can see. I am Nancy Nnaji. Bye now. Thank you for watching our video. Please hit the subscribe button below, turn on post notification to follow all our updates.